Hello, everybody. I want to thank you for joining me for today's edition of Arkansas Alive. Our title for today may be a little disconcerting to some people, may not understand, but if you'll stay tuned, you'll know exactly what the Spirit of God's trying to get across to us. Our title is Two Nations of People. So stay tuned. Arkansas Alive starts right now. Yesterday, I spent a considerable amount of time addressing issues of chaos in our country. And we see in the Bible there are two nations, two types of people. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Let's start back at 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And let's start with verse 10. God, let's go back to verse 9. As it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. God has revealed them things what? Them things which God has prepared for those that he loves and those that love him. God's revealed them unto us by his Spirit, for the Spirit searcheth all things, the deep things of God. For what man knoweth the things of man, save the Spirit of man which is in him? Even so the things which God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God. We have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that God has freely given to us, which things also we speak not in the words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Ghost teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. The natural man, the carnal man, receives not the things of the Spirit of God, they're foolishness unto him. And they can neither know, and neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual, and we're talking about two nations of people, spiritual people, we're talking about carnal people. Paul dealt with this in Romans 7, a treatise, and he talked about the flesh man, the spirit man. He that is spiritual judges all things, yet he is judged of no man. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. And I, brethren, could not speak unto you as unto spiritual. I could not explain spiritual things to you. I could not speak of spiritual revelation to you. Why? Because you are carnal as babes in Christ. Now, I told you there's two entities that are at fault for the chaos, the confusion, the destruction that we have in America today. And that's the family, the fathers mainly, and the church, the pastors mainly. Neither one are doing their job. They're not following the examples given us in the Scriptures. Okay, I could not talk to you about spiritual things, but unto carnal things. I fed you with milk, not with meat. For hitherto you were not able to bear it, neither yet now are you able, for you are yet carnal. For whereas there is among you envying, strife, divisions, are you not carnal and walk as men? When he says you walk as men, he's talking about you walk as mere men. A lot of people are still confused as to where trouble comes from. Too many Christians believe in Calvinism and fatalism. They believe that God's the source of all trouble and that whatever happens to you is the will of God. That's fatalism and Calvinism. That is not Bible. And yet the people that believe that have no answers to the problems that we face. The natural man can only understand, solve problems naturally. And the problems that we have in our culture today and in America today are not natural problems. They look like they're natural problems. Even the church has turned to psychology to try and figure out things. Psychology doesn't know anything spiritual. Man does not have a subconscious mind. Man has a conscience. Paul said, my spirit bears witness with my conscience. My conscience and my spirit bear witness. Your conscience is the voice of your spirit. Reason is the voice of your mind. Feeling is the voice of your body. You cannot educate ignorance out of a man. You have to teach them the things of God. Now I'm going to have some more to say about our young people, because what we're seeing in a lot of our colleges, universities, in culture in general, is a deterioration in the natural of manhood. I saw an advertisement. I wish I'd written it down because I can't remember what they call this. I saw it on television. They showed pictures of young men, I think it was in their 20s and 30s, that are paying up to $10,000 to go through a course of training to make men out of them. This is a carnal thing. This is a natural thing. They are paying up to $10,000, maybe it's more than that, up to $10,000 to join an elite group, and they showed them doing calisthenics, working out, jogging, running, keeping their physical body fit. It didn't mention what they're doing mentally. But I thought to myself, here these young guys are paying, or their parents are paying, $10,000 or more for them to join this club to teach them how to be men. I thought to myself, man, the government even taught me how to be a man in 3 months. It's called boot camp. It's called United States Navy boot camp. The Navy and the Marines took boot camp together. Camp Pendleton, Camp Nimitz, only a barbed wire fence separating us. Hey, they paid me. I didn't pay them. I enlisted, shipped out, but not before I went through boot camp. The government can train our young men to be men if we can get them away from the computer and out of the nightclubs and whatever else they're doing. Why pay some private organization $10,000 to make a man out of you? And I know sometimes I sound nostalgic when I go in this direction, but this is the way it's supposed to work in the Bible. I'm going to take a little detour here. Go over to Proverbs, and let's look at chapter 1. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and let's look at chapter 1. I didn't realize it at the time, but my father, he had an understanding of these things, even though at the time, I don't think he was a born-again Christian, but he understood these things better than most. In Proverbs chapter 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction. Here it is right here in the Bible. You want to know wisdom, instruction? Perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion or advice. How many young people do you see that need advice? They don't know where to go. Wise men will hear, will increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise, their dark sayings, meaning sayings that have not received light yet. Doesn't mean they can't be understood. It just means there's still an area of darkness over them. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now listen to the next word. My son, hear the instruction of your father. Oh, man. The Bible has the answer to everything. Sons, hear the instruction of your father. Now, that only works if your father knows the Lord, is born again, and understands the Scriptures. It won't work in an ungodly family, because an ungodly family where the father is a jerk and he's on drugs, or he's unfaithful, or he's a slacker, he won't go to work, or he's drunk and he's on drugs, that won't work in a secularized family. But the Bible tells you the formula. It says, my son, hear the instruction of your father. Well, you've heard me tell this many, many times. I'm not bragging. I'm not trying to be nostalgic. I was that way with my father. My father was a godly man. And my father instructed me. He corrected me. I remember asking him one time, because I had messed up. There were no, quote, power mowers, lawn mowers like we have today. There was a push kind, and this first power mower came out. This was in the 50s. This first power mower came out. It was belt driven, and it was a huge thing. It was almost like a rotary tiller or something you use on a farm. But it was a lawnmower, and my dad acquired one, because we lived at that time on a quarter of a block, and we had a big yard. And so he was showing me how to use this lawnmower. And I thought I had it down, and so he went off to do something else. I had chores. I had things I had to do around the house, and cutting the yard and splitting the wood and doing those things, outside things. I helped him build a patio and lay brick as a floor and all that kind of stuff. He taught me those things. His daddy taught him. And so I was playing around as kids do, and that lawnmower got away from me and mowed down 2 or 3 of his hedges that he had just planted. Whew! I could see the steam coming out of around him, but he controlled his emotions. And he just told me, he said, son, and he said it firmly, he said, why don't you get on your bicycle and go take a ride somewhere? I guess he was protecting himself and me from what he might say or do. So I got on my bicycle. I knew he was mad. I knew I had messed up. And I just rode, around the neighborhood and came back, and he was mowing the grass and replanting the hedges. And we sat down at the picnic table in our backyard. Now, my dad grew up during the Depression. He fought in World War II. He came home, rebuilt America. And I sat down with him, and I said, Daddy, why is it that I don't have the same determination to do the right things like you do? And he could see that I was serious. I was mad at myself because I'd done such a stupid thing. And he looked at me, he said, son, when I was your age, I was fighting a war, and I had a wife and 2 children. He said, and that'll make any man worth his salt. That's an old Navy term. That responsibility will make any man stand on his hind legs and do what is his duty to do. He said, no, I'm not advocating that you get married. I'm just saying that I had responsibility. Was in my teens, when my dad, when he was 18, I think 19, 20 maybe, Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And he and his friends, they were all in college. First year college, Little Rock Junior College, which is now University of Arkansas off University Avenue. And he was a civil engineering student. And I asked him, I said, what did you do when you heard the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we had a declaration of war? And he said, I did what we all did. We all went down and enlisted. Well, that stuck with me. Well, I was already in the Navy right after college. And when Vietnam broke out, I put in for transfer to Vietnam to a river gunboat. Instead, I got assigned to a destroyer and sent to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, at the Bay of Pigs. But I was following the pattern that my father had set before me. And I realize that to this day. His answer to me, any man that's worth his salt will do his duty, will do what he has to do. Well, then when I went in the Navy and went into boot camp in San Diego, California, it was reinforced. My father's statement to me was reinforced because that's what they taught us in boot camp. We didn't have to pay anybody $10,000 to train me to become a man. The government did it. Now, let me go back to Proverbs 1. My son, hear the instruction of your father. Now, the problem that this doesn't work in too few families is because the father is a jerk. He doesn't have any responsibility. He won't do what's right himself, so he can't teach it to his son. Hear the instruction of your father, and forsake not the law of your mother. Now, my mother, here is referring to your mother sets down the social graces. Your mother teaches you how to be a man where women are concerned. My mother taught me how to respect a woman. My father respected my mother. I remember one time, and I'm telling off on myself, I remember one time I got kind of smart with my mother. And sometimes teenagers do that. I got kind of smart with her, and I talked back to her. Whoo! Wow, that was the wrong thing to do. My daddy heard it. He came in here in the den. He sat me down. He said, sit down. He said, I don't want to ever hear you talk to your mother like that again. She's your mother, and she's my wife. Don't you ever talk to her that way again. I never did. I treated my mother with respect. I didn't call my mother and father old man and old lady. My friends did. Well, my old man said this. Well, my old lady said, I never did refer to my parents as my old man or my old lady. I reverenced them. And I found out later after I got saved, the Bible says to honor your mother and father. It will be well with you, and you'll live a long life. Those are the promises that we have if we'll obey the instruction of our father and take heed to the law of our mother. Now, my mother taught me the social graces. She taught me how to behave, how to, when you go on a date, how to treat a girl, how to open the door, how to open the car door, how to talk, all these kind of things. You know, I grew up in the best of times, I think, in the 50s. I think it was the best of times. We just finished a world war in 45. Men were coming home, and economy was booming, and things were doing well, and I was getting blessed just by being alive in the 50s. And so I began to learn these things from my mother. Besides that, my mother was actually, when she and Daddy got married, they eloped because the nation was at war. They didn't know what the future held, so they ran off and they eloped and ran off and got married. I was born 9 months later. Daddy shipped out. Mama was a ballet dancer, and she was performing with a ballet troupe in New York City doing Swan Lake. And so when I was born, of course, all of that stopped. And we lived with her parents during the war. A lot of families did that because the men were overseas, and a lot of the women, my mother never worked outside that dance company that she worked for. But she was a very graceful lady. She was tall and slim, and just, she had graduated from Christian College in Columbia, Missouri. She was very polished and a wonderful woman. And she would teach me these social graces, these things, how to treat people and how to blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Well, Daddy would give me instruction. Now, that's father's responsibility. So if you're a son and you didn't like your father's instruction, he was doing what the Bible said. Your mother was teaching the social graces. Don't forsake the law of your mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace. And the marginal reference says, they shall add an ornament of grace unto your head and chains about your neck. Necklaces, not chains to bind. So the Bible instructs us to learn these things. And he places the responsibility on the fathers. Now, if you go over to Ephesians and different parts of the Scriptures, it talks about how the older men are to instruct the younger men, the older women to instruct the younger women. My wife and I pastored 35 years, and my wife's assignment was, according to her, was to polish, prune, and perfect the ladies of our church. She held ladies' conferences. She had guest speakers. She held advances. They would go and stay someplace, whatever. She did what she knew to train women to be mothers, wives, to be professional. She was a professional secretary at one time. When we got married, she was the secretary to the Bankers Association president, and she was a professional, but then we started traveling in the ministry and all that changed. But before that, and she just taught all of the ladies how to be polished, pruned, and perfected. We were in a church the other day, and we were sitting there, and pastor was preaching, and all of a sudden here comes this young girl walked right in front of us, and she's got a cup of coffee in her hand, or it looked like it was, the church had a coffee bar out in the lobby, so she had gotten her a latte. She had her latte, and she had on short shorts. And she was just walking and went over and sat down. She didn't think a thing about it. To her, that's perfectly normal. But according to the Scriptures, it's not. You're supposed to reverence God when you're in the house of God. You don't treat it like a theater. You don't treat it like you're supposed to reverence the Lord God and when you're gathered together in His presence. So my wife would teach that. She had a Miss America speak at one of her conferences. And this Miss America was teaching women how to dress. Now remember, we're talking about two nations. We're talking about carnal and spiritual. And she was teaching these women how to dress. Now this former Miss America. And she told the women, she said, in my wardrobe, I do not own a pair of blue jeans. And I do not own a pair of tennis shoes. Now you might think, oh my goodness, when was this, 1940? No, it was just a few years ago. And she said, I do not own a pair of blue jeans, and I don't own a pair of tennis shoes. She said, I don't wear blue jeans and tennis shoes. I wear slacks, and I wear loafers, or I wear... She said, she's talking about, of course, to church or to a social function. And so many of our young ladies, they don't know how to dress. They don't know how to carry themselves. They don't know how to behave themselves. I remember my wife's office was on the corner of the building as we pastored. And she was watching one of our young men who was on our staff after church one Sunday. And he had brought this girl with him to church. And my wife was watching them walk to his truck and get ready to leave after church was over. And she noticed that he just went and got in on his side of the truck, and then the girl just had to get on the other side of the truck. And so the next week, she called this young man in, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling this. She called this young man in and said, John, let me give you some instruction on how to treat your girlfriends when you bring them to church, or any place for that matter. He said, you open the door for them, and you go over to her side of the car, and you open the door for her. You assist her in, and then you go over to your side. And he just looked at her and said, yes, ma'am, thank you. And he continued to do that. He continued to be one of our best employees. He was one of our best staff members. He was diligent. He was complimentary. He was honest. He was a hard worker. Today, that man is John Thurston, Secretary of State of the state of Arkansas. I stop by and say hello to him every once in a while, and he always tells me, he said, Pastor, he said, most of what I learned to be able to do my job as Land Commissioner and Secretary of State, I learned at church. I knew his parents, or I know his parents. They're fine people. He's fine people. He learned and took instruction from his father and from his mother and from Sister Jeannie, his spiritual mama, and she watched over him. If we'll teach our children that, the Bible says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. If every mother, every father would train and teach their children, then we'd have a different culture out there. Now, some of you may think I've gotten off, but I haven't. I'm going to come back tomorrow, and I'm going to pick up here in this book, The Book of Man by William Bennett, former Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan. And I want to finish stating some of the things that he said, because it has to do with two nations, spiritual and carnal. And he talks about the code of men. So join me for tomorrow. I guarantee you this will help you if you're a parent, if you're going to be a parent, or maybe you need to correct some things. It'll really help you. So I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas, and where you're watching too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on X at Happy_Caldwell. VTN is on Roku. Search VTN in the channel store and add us to your lineup. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at VTNTV.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at VTNTV.com.